You're listening to the Grow Landscapers podcast, the podcast where we delve deeper into landscape business, interviewing legends of the UK landscaping industry. So, join host Nick Ruddle as he explores their thoughts, insights and experiences. That's here on the Grow Landscapers podcast.
Hi and welcome to the Grow Landscapers podcast. I'm Nick Ruddle and today we're here with someone who runs an outstanding landscape business who've won multiple awards, not only for the projects they design and build, but for being recognised for the extremely successful business they run. It's Mr. Tony Benger from Tony Benger Landscaping. How are you doing?
Hello.
Very well?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Brilliant. I'm very privileged to be one of the judges for the Pro Landscaper Awards. And over the last few years, I've scored quite a few of your award entries, and thankfully they became award-winning entries. So obviously that's why I thought better to invite you on the show, because who's better really to find out about building a successful landscaping business than yourself? And because I've read so many pages of your entries, I think you're really well qualified and people will get a lot of value from that. So that's why we're here. Thanks for accepting the invitation. I'm sure a lot of people will benefit hugely from your years of knowledge and wisdom. So without further ado, we'll get started, okay?
Yeah.
So Tony, how long have you been in business for yourself?
I came back from travelling in 1985 and I'd been farming before and I didn't really know what I was going to do, and my parents have a garden open to the public, and so my mother was being asked all the time, could you come and design this border and do that sort of thing, so she needed a hand, so I gave her a hand. Well, that lasted 2 whole weeks, because working for your mother doesn't really work. So I started up on my own and then subcontracted to her, and she subcontracted back to me.
Oh, very good, very good. So it's your mum who got you into the industry originally then?
That's right, yes. It worked quite well. And it worked for 15 years until she wanted to retire totally.
Right.
And then concentrate on her own garden. But I was lucky enough to have my sister who was just had children and wanted to work sort of 1 or 2 days a week. Well, that soon became 5 days a week. And she's our head designer. And we've been employing people ever since.
Wow. So you kept it in the family to begin with.
Yeah,
So in those early years then, where did it all start? I mean, what did it look like?
Well, I had a mini estate. I borrowed a wheelbarrow and a shovel, and that's how I started.
Wow.
Literally, I was lucky enough to have my parents had the land, so I had a yard and I had all that, but I didn't have any money or anything. And then I was able to buy my plants from my mother because she had a little nursery, and so that's how we started.
Wow.
And I was going to college 1 day a week as well, learning about the intricate parts of horticulture. And I had a background in soil science through the farming, and I knew how to work soil, which actually was a great help for bigger schemes and bigger contracts.
Yeah, definitely. So what was it that made you personally go into business for yourself? You obviously started helping your mum out, but what was it that drove you to build or start your own business?
Well, I sort of enjoyed being in charge and having a role. I didn't mind particularly working for other people, but as long as I was sort of a manager, but I didn't have enough qualifications in agriculture to go on further, and so being in horticulture, it's more of an exact science and with planting, and I had my mother's background with plant names, so I was able to become quite well known within the area, and I had that backing, and then we've sort of created it from there on, and with continuous learning, and inevitably you get to know all the plant names. So, well, not all the plant names, but most shrubs and trees we're pretty good at, and with a collective number of people, the skills, one person will be more in tune with trees, or one person will be more in tune with different types of grasses. And so that's one of the advantages of getting bigger, is you may not know the answer, but somebody in your company has that expertise on plant pathogens or diseases of trees that I'm afraid I'm not that knowledgeable on.
Yeah, well, you can't know everything, can you? And I think a lot of the most successful business owners in the world recognize that, and recognize that you can't do it all on your own. You don't have all the answers to everything, and in fact, you make it easier for yourself if you don't have that approach, don't you? Really, because use people play them to their strengths and to what they're really, really good at, and they're better than you at that anyway. So if you get involved, you actually make things worse. So brilliant. So you started out with a van, with a shovel, and with a a wheelbarrow.
Yes.
What does it look like now then?
So we now employ over 120 staff. We have 55 over 55 vans. We have a 8-acre site here where we've got buildings and nursery, and that's how we started. Our nursery was literally, we had a few plants left over and I couldn't bear to not water them and let them die. So you end up watering them every weekend, and then you think, well, I'll get a irrigation system to help me, and then of course you get a bigger and bigger nursery, and then you propagate them and pot them up, and suddenly you've got quite a big nursery. So we've got a 2-3 acre nursery here where we look after plants and grow them on for different projects.
So fun, isn't it? So there's a few from a few pots that you didn't want to die, and then you have like 2 or 3 acre site nursery. Yeah, I don't know how that happens, but it obviously just maybe a natural progression.
Yeah.
Wow. So 55 vans, 120 employees, and an 8-acre site. So lots of mouths to feed there. Lots of diesel to put in these vans.
Yes, cool. Blimey, that's a real cost these days.
Yeah, I bet you're feeling the pinch there. So I suppose, but even more important than that, you really do run a good tight ship and run a great business and make it as efficient and as profitable as possible. So I want to come on to some of that stuff now then. What do you personally think are the most important elements to running a successful business? Through the years, you've grown it to where it is now. Obviously, lots of lessons to learn. What do you feel as the most important things that you need to have in place and have knowledge of?
Well, one of the most important things is we've always tried to do a really good job to the best of our abilities. And quite often you realize you've underpriced it, but all you've got to do is do a good job. And, if you've underpriced it, just give yourself a slap on the back of your hand and say, right, next time you'll know how to do it. But don't try and cut corners. Try and do a really good job, and customers will come back time and time again. I know I did some work for Waterers Landscapes many years ago in Euro Disney, and they went out there and did one small project, and they got their fingers really burnt. But they decided to just do a really good job and do it well, and they were one of the very few landscapers that were invited to go back and do the second phase, and they made up for it in later times.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson well learned, and I've done exactly the same things, underpriced jobs, but just do a good job, and then you get asked to go back and back and back time and time again.
Get the opportunity to make your money back and some going forward. There's your reputation as well, I suppose, isn't it?
Well, that's right. It's much more important than actually making a profit on the end of the day. You'll make the money eventually, but maybe a year or two later.
Yeah. So you mentioned there that you've been in that situation yourself before. So what are the biggest mistakes or the biggest lessons you've learned in business over the years?
Probably underpricing work Because if you overprice them, you don't get the job, and if you underprice it, you usually get the job. But you just got to price it right. Usually, that's the best way of doing it.
Yeah.
But doing a good job is so important, because best horticultural practice. Quite often, you have a project where you don't quite know whether to advise the customer to do this or this or this. I've always tried to, if you don't know what to do, just go back to best horticultural practice, and it won't bite you in the bum. It really is important to. Nobody can argue with best horticultural practice. You know, it might cost the customer more money, it might cost you more money, it might be more difficult to do, but if you go for best horticultural practice, you can't go wrong, really.
Yeah, there's a right way and a wrong way, and I think if you, as long as you stick on the right sides, you're gonna come out better, aren't you?
Yeah,
Reputation
and
and the end product.
It's the same with best building practice. If you're doing a patio or something, you just do best building practice, and then with no shortcuts, and then it can't go wrong.
No, you're safe then as well, insurance-wise, as long as you're following the right ways. So you mentioned about pricing there in terms of underpricing or overpricing, and there's obviously the happy medium in the middle. What have you learnt then in order to, what makes you be able to price better? What do you do that makes you in the right sort of ballpark figure then? Because you've been burnt on the lower side, and obviously everyone wants to charge as much as possible, but there's a ceiling. So what do you do? What would your advice be to people listening to this now if they're struggling to get the price right?
We compared with a lot of landscapers, some landscapers don't price per project. I always price per project to make sure that I'm learning from each project, and some bigger projects we split into smaller parts so that we can work out how much does it cost to plant a tree. If you've got 10,000 trees to plant, and you know exactly how much time you spent planting them, you can then divide it just by your 10,000 trees, and that way you know how long it takes to plant a tree. And analysing of figures is pretty important, I feel, because you can then know there's no good carrying on doing something where you're losing money.
No, I think, and you may agree with this, it's an area where a lot of people sort of avoid because they don't necessarily understand the numbers, so they sort of bury their head in the sand. And I think landscapers are very good to, stereotypically, are very good at what they do operationally, but don't always understand the financial aspects because maybe they've not been taught it, or they've not learnt it, or not been aware of it. But it is one of the most important things to get right in the business, isn't it? If you don't get that right, then you're losing money, or you're hoping and you're keeping your fingers crossed that you're actually going to make money, which is not a good strategy. So knowing your numbers.
And the problem is, if you're doing a big project, you will make bits on some bits and not make money on the other bits. And unless you know which bits you're making more money on, you won't be able to avoid the loss-making bits or whatever. So knowing your numbers does help a lot.
Yeah, and knowing what numbers to look out for. It's like playing a round of golf or a game of tennis. You know, if you didn't keep score and it was close, how would you know who was winning or losing?
Yes, exactly.
It's like having your scorecard of business. You know, if you're not keeping score, how do you know whether you're winning or losing? And that's whether you're making a profit or not, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous that people shy away from the numbers just because they don't necessarily understand them. But when you understand things become easy. It's only when we don't understand things that it's confusing and difficult. But when we understand it and we learn something, you think, oh, I know that now. It's easy. So I think a great piece of advice there, absolutely, is if you don't know your numbers, don't be scared, don't be shy. Just learn how to become better in that area of running your business, and your results will get better too.
One year I didn't put up my rates to any of my customers because I'd made a reasonable amount of money and inflation wasn't running that high. And the following year, the accountant and I went through all our figures, and we hadn't made anywhere near the amount the following year. And that was just because I didn't put my rates up.
Right.
And I would strongly recommend everybody putting their rates up every year.
Yeah.
Even if you've made a reasonable sum of money, just put them up a little bit, because you'll be surprised how much your profit margins will be eroded.
I think that's a really, really good piece of advice, because not just now, I think people are now thinking, right, we're going to put our prices up because they have to, because everything else, and everyone knows that everything's going up. But to do that every year anyway, to analyze and be able to sort of just keep stepping it up gradually, as opposed to waiting 3 or 4 years and then doing 15-20%, maybe that's not quite so viable.
No, that's
Very
really
good.
bad news for the customer as well.
Yeah, but I think it's usually the business owners that tend to worry more about putting the prices up than the customers. Because if you were to put them up 2, 3, or 5% year on year, it's not really, you don't really sort of notice that. You really don't. So I think it's often something that the business owner has to get over in their own heads, rather than what the customers will say. So I definitely think there's some good advice there. Okay, so what major setbacks have you had? You started 1985. So what major obstacles or major challenges or setbacks have you had in the past?
We've gone through some fairly big recessions in the past, and I hope we're not heading for another one, but everybody always keeps predicting we are. Having a diverse business has been helpful, because if you work just for builders, house builders, I've known them, within 3 weeks suddenly stop work, just no more work. They would not build another house, and suddenly your income stream has completely gone to nothing. So having a diverse business, using a bit of maintenance, because that is continuous, and having domestic clients as well, because domestic tend to be less reactive to recession. And then when the recession hit the first time, we did more domestic work, and by the time the domestic clients had then realized there was a big recession, they were beginning to tail off with work, and house builders were starting to build again. So we were able to start building work, and having a bit of maintenance as well is fairly recession proof, because grass keeps growing.
That's right. That's it. The hedges still need pruning. I think that's a really good, timely piece of advice, really, because as you alluded to there, I think we're heading for a recession kind of situation again, and it's probably good timing then, if people are just focused on one area of the business, maybe to diversify, like you say, into other areas, because when one's up, the other's down, and vice versa. You should be able to ride the waves, really, and come out the other side. Okay, so you diversified. Are there any other, over the last sort of 40 or 35 years that you've been in business, are there any other situations where you've had to sort of face up to other things, not just recessions, but any other major issues or major challenges that you've faced in the business?
Well, COVID was interesting.
Yeah.
Suddenly you've got, I interviewed a mechanic on the Saturday, and it was all planned for, he was going to hand his notice in on the Monday. And I said, well, just before you hand your notice in to your present employer, let's just see what this disease is going. And literally, Boris on that Monday night closed the whole country down, and that was interesting times. We had managers meetings sort of every on Zoom and remotely and in the yard, and trying to work out, and we were making up rules in the morning and then having to change the rules in the afternoon, and we just had to be very reactive to the changing situation. You didn't want to listen too much to the BBC. They would highlight some bits and not other bits. So we were reading the government's website and reading the rules, and even the police didn't really understand the rules because they had to disseminate the rules. So they advised us to actually print out the government website and highlight the bits that we thought we were relevant to, and that way we were able to keep working, or in some departments were able to keep working. The nursery had to keep watering the plants because we had thousands and thousands of plants in stock, so they had to be watered, potted up, various things, and we were able to keep going on some of the maintenance on sites where we were working outside. We sent 3 men in 3 separate vans and found safe ways of working, really.
Yeah, and with over 100 staff members as well, it's a lot of responsibility, wasn't there? A lot of pressure on.
Yes, there was a lot of pressure, especially in the first few days, because people were, trying to canvass me to close the company down, or saying we shouldn't be going to work, or somebody else saying, yeah, I want to come to work, I can't afford not to be at work, and I've got a mortgage to pay, and there was so many balancing acts to have. But we found a safe way, and some of the people that were furloughed didn't like being furloughed, and other people that were working wanted to be furloughed. But
anyway, it was a minefield, wasn't it, at the time?
It was a minefield, but it was very interesting times.
Yeah, well, it's never a dull moment. I mean, I think hopefully let's say that you've cracked the recession proofing of your business, because you've been through them before. Let's hope you don't have to do another global pandemic and get through that one. But if you do, then you'll know that you can do that and you'll get through that one as well. Yeah. And I suppose once you get through things like that, I think it makes you much more resilient as a business owner. You just believe that I can get through anything. If we did that, we can get through this. And I think as a team, when more and more people in the business have shared those experiences with you, the belief and the resilience of people, really sort of gives you confidence that you'll get through anything that life or business throws at you. Yeah. So good. It's all very easy when things are going well. Business is easy, but it's when it's tough that's when it really does, show people for, either they step up or don't they? Yeah. Okay, so here's a question to put you on the spot. Then 3 tips. Okay, I'm going to ask you to name just 3 suggestions of how to improve your efficiencies or profits of a business out of your years. What would you say the top 3 tips would be to improve your efficiencies?
Well, doing a really good job is not a tip for making a quick profit. Long term, that is the most important thing. All you have to do is do a good job. Tip number 1, I have never over borrowed. Borrowing too much money is I think is a recipe for disaster, because if you get into recession and you're locked into a finance deal on a bit of kit that you're not using, that's a really hard job.
Yeah.
Putting your prices up every year, I think, is another tip. So I think that's those are the 3 things that I would: doing a good job, don't over borrow, and putting your prices up every year.
Very good, very good. When you say doing a good job, does that mean on time, on spec, on budget, or what do you mean by that?
I never worry too much about the budget.
Right.
I never worry too much about the time unless there's a penalty clause in there. We try and start. Too many people try and start a project on time. The customer are very, very keen for you to start when you say you're going to start, but we try not to give them a start date. We try and say it'll be roughly the middle of June or end of June or something.
Yeah.
But we strongly believe in trying to finish a job before we start another one. Too many builders try and please the customer or the next customer, but upset the previous customer by not finishing off the job. We try and finish a job if we possibly can before we start the next one. Yeah. So the teams are programmed in to go and finish that job, but we don't give a set date for a start of a new job.
You can't, can you, really? Because there's so many different moving parts, isn't there? And you put yourself under immense pressure in the eyes of the new customer, and you're going to annoy the last customer. So no one wins, do they, really? So
you just have to explain to the customer, we hope to be starting this week, but we strongly believe in finishing the job before we start another one.
Yeah, and I think most people are reasonable, aren't they? And they appreciate
very
that.
Reasonable.
And they communication.
They don't remember when you started. What they remember is whether you finished it or not.
Yeah.
And finished it well.
Yeah, you don't want to leave them with a bad taste in their mouth, because then, you know, it ruins the whole experience, doesn't it? And the feelings that people are left with determine on the experiences they have, and you want to leave them on a nice happy note.
Yeah,
very good. So obviously you've been in business for a good few years. What have you found the most rewarding parts have personally been for you?
Definitely seeing trees grow. It sounds a bit silly, but visiting sites that you planted 10, 20, 30 years ago is quite amazing to see how big a tree can get in 30 years. It is phenomenal. Yeah. And seeing staff grow into their new roles, and we've got some staff that have been here over 30 years, and they have flourished and moved up into new roles, and coaching them forward really, really helps and allows them to flourish in their own rights.
So you grow trees and you grow people. Very good. Very good, very good. That's good. I mean, 30 years, people been with you for 30 years says a lot, says everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't do everything yourself. So you need to coach people to learn how to do the new things themselves. Having teams to grow the departments, and they then put forward new staff to grow that department in better ways. And suddenly you find things are happening that you don't even know about, and sometimes it's a bit scary as a manager, but you must button your lip and find out why they're spending another 10 grand on this bit of kit or that bit of kit before you start saying we can't afford it.
You've definitely got to be able to let go, haven't you, really?
Yeah, it's quite difficult, especially when you've been watching the pounds, shillings and pence from years and years, to seeing it into a bigger, but you have to look at it a bit more holistically and just let it grow.
Yeah, I suppose you've got to trust the people that you're handing over to, haven't you, really?
Yes.
It's like handing over your baby. You wouldn't hand your baby over to a stranger. No. You know, you hand it over to someone that you trust implicitly, wouldn't you? So, same kind of thing.
I try and retain the right to veto, as Margaret Thatcher did with the European European. I don't think I very rarely use it, but I let the teams develop. I try and coach them and try and steer them in the right way, but let them develop. And most of the time I'm proved wrong anyway. If I've been wary of something, that if they've done enough research, they're usually right.
Oh, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Good thing.
Scary. Yeah. They're all better than me anyway.
Well, that's what you want, isn't it? That's what you want. If you were doing everything, you'd be the busiest man in the business. You don't want to be, do you? You want to be the least busy person.
Exactly.
And safe in the knowledge that you can trust people to do a great job and a better job that you would do yourself. So that's I think that's where a lot of people maybe get it wrong. They try and control everything, do everything, and therefore they're the most busiest person and the most stressful person, and people are scared to make a mistake, and then they go home early, they don't go the extra mile. You create a bit of a monster for yourself.
Exactly. You've got it. You've hit it on the head.
Yeah. No, we want to. I don't suppose Richard Branson or Alan Sugar spend all the hours in their business. They've got great people they trust, haven't they? They've looked at recruit well in the first place, build the right teams in the right departments, and then coach them and strategically sort of guide them, I suppose, along the way. Okay, so if you could give some advice for someone who may be at the moment at a crossroads and they're a little bit stuck in their business, or they really want to expand, but they just don't know what steps they might need to take, what kind of advice would you give to them?
You want to analyze who your ideal customer is. Getting the right type of customer that spends the right amount of money with you, that's pretty important. And it's no good being a busy fool if you're, I don't know, mowing people's lawns only. You can't it's quite difficult to expand unless you've got enough staff to do it for you, because you need to find the next customer. But you need to analyze whether you're making good profit out of mowing those lawns, or I don't know, building show homes or something. If you're building good quality work and making money out of those jobs, then expand that side of it. But you want to work out the bits that you're not making money at as well.
It comes back to knowing your numbers then, I suppose, and analysing your numbers. And really understanding how to interpret those numbers. I love the fact that you just used the expression busy fool. We use that quite a lot because I think you can be dragged into feeling like you're being productive, but actually you're not really. You're not spending the right time in the right areas. But unless you've analysed the numbers, you don't know, do you? So, and understanding who your best customer is and not trying to be all things to everybody, I think that's great advice. Very good, very good. Nice and simple, very, very, very effective. So, right, we have one more question for you, Tony, before I let you go. If there was one piece of advice, just one golden nugget that you could give to someone to, from all your years of running your business, what would be the one golden nugget that you would give to someone who's trying to build their business to where they see their business in the future?
Well, I hate to say it, I've already said it before. All you got to do is do a good job.
Perfect.
That's all you got to do.
Summed up in one sentence.
Yeah.
Tony, it's been really, really great talking to you. Really, really interesting. Love hearing about your history and your story and all your challenges you've been through and your pearls of wisdom. So I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. You've got 120 people to look after. I'm sure your managers are doing most of the looking after though. And I hope you're not the busiest man in that business, and I'm sure you're not. But thanks, Tony. I really appreciate your time, your effort, your wise words. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Grow Landscapers podcast. To get in touch and see how we can help you with your business by emailing nick@nickruddle.com.